I blinked on the name of the movie. It's
A Woman Under the
A Woman Under
Influence.
the Influence. Yeah. Yep.
I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about A Woman Under the Influence.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we are going to be watching Sweet Smell of Success. This is a film that we have talked about before on the after show when you saw it, which, as you pointed out, has been quite a while now. It's probably been at least a year.
No, at least a year, maybe a couple. I mean, not a long
Yeah.
time, but but that's a movie that when I saw it, I thought it was so good that I would just love to watch it like every year if I could.
I'm very
It's really
excited.
good. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of noir. Noir is probably
Yeah.
one of my favorite genres. So,
It's
and it's been a
noir-ish, I
while.
would say. Yeah, yeah.
It's noir-ish. It's a
a
boxing
little
movie,
bit.
isn't it? Isn't it?
No, it's
Or
not
no?
really.
Why did I think
Well,
it was a
is it a
boxing
boxing
movie?
movie? I think it might
I
be a
don't
boxing
know.
movie. You see, there's things about it that I don't remember. It's very businessy. There's a lot of like business and it's also a lot of stuff about journalism in it too.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I am very excited. But this week we watched, and I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. I think this may be one of the best movies we've ever watched for the podcast before.
I think I tend to agree, Austin. Yeah, and you know what? Like when it this week I watched seven different John Cassavetes movies.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't get. There are two other ones in his oeuvre that people consider to be very good that I didn't get around to. I didn't get around to Gloria or Love Stream, but I watched all of his
Hmm.
other ones. Um, I think this is the best one, at least of the ones that I've seen, for a lot of different reasons. But his other movies are nowhere near bad though. They're all amazing.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of John Cassavetes films, all of the big ones, the most famous ones, but this one just blows you in a way, and it really is at its core a Gina Rowlands film. I mean, this is
Yeah,
her. She's everything. Without her, this film just does not exist on the same universe that it exists with her performance. I've never seen such an honest and authentic portrayal of mental illness and psychosis.
sure. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. Or just, being what does he say? What does Peter Falk say at the beginning? Like my wife isn't crazy, she's unusual. Which I think that's like a kind of like a very like yeah, like there's no like uh the word psychosis isn't ever used in the movie, right? Like it's more kind
No.
of like but like I think like yeah, like that performance of Gina Rollins is so fucking amazing, dude. It's like one of the greatest performances ever. Watching all the other John Cassavetes movies, of course they were in a relationship together. They were married, they had children,
Yeah.
John and Gina. And Gina, I don't know how she does it. It's kind of crazy. When you watch all the John Cassavetes movies that she's in, which are most of them, it always feels like I'm looking at a different person. It always feels like I'm looking at a different actor. I don't know how she does it. It's just like obviously like time I think has like a thing where, like an opening night,
Hmm.
which is 3 years after this one, she looks a little bit older, and of course age and getting old or whatever is like a big part of that movie, right? Like it's a big conversational piece of that film, like a very large part of it. But I don't know how she does it, man. Like it just kind of feels like she's always like transforming herself so subtly in a way where it just always feels like I'm looking at someone different, from between all the different movies. I guess the way that she talks and acts and stands and walks, it's just it's extremely impressive. Like the ability for a person to kind of like hone in themselves in such a controlled way. Like most people don't even necessarily even know, and of course that's kind of like a part of the movie. I was gonna say like most people don't even know really how to act like themselves, really, right?
Yeah.
And so it is kind of impressive for her to, and that's kind of like a part of the movie, right? Just be yourself, just be yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a movie about expectations and the expectations that we put on ourselves and others. And I've seen psychosis. I have family members who have spent time in mental hospitals for a variety of different
Yeah,
reasons. And I've seen a lot of films that depict, there's no good word for it. I'm using psychosis because crazy is an
sure.
inaccurate
No, crazy isn't
interpretation.
necessarily. Yeah, yeah.
It's more just this way of thinking and seeing the world and speaking, this mania combined with all of these other things. And what makes this film so special and unique and different from so many films that have presented themselves as films about mental illness, whether it's depression, mania,
Mhm.
schizophrenia, is that this film doesn't use it as a point of entertainment. It's not
Not
there
really.
to raise the stakes. It's not there so we can be surprised. And I think about John Cassavetes' filming of Gina Rowlands in particular in this film,
Mhm.
and it would be very easy to have these sort of psychotic looking images and having this surreal Lynchian look to it. But instead, it is very calm, it's very collected, a lot of long shots. When we're
Yeah,
close to them, there's this sense of claustrophobia. He uses long lenses a lot in this film, a lot of very fast cuts matched with very long takes. One of the shots that I think about is that moment right after she lets her mom take her kids and she goes back into the
Mhm.
house. And there's that super long scene where she's just walking around the house. And that's the first time we get an idea of who she is. And she's not talking to anyone. There's no dialogue here, which is what makes
When she
this
gets back from
scene.
the facility.
No, at the beginning of the film.
Oh, the beginning of the film. Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I was confused which scene you were talking about when she gets back. Gotcha.
She,
I love that scene at the beginning.
I mean,
She's funny.
she's
She's
so
like a sense of
funny.
humor. Yeah, I love her. She kind of does. She has like these like ticks almost, right? Like she has these like little like she does these like that's why the character is so good of Maple. The character of Maple is amazing, just because like they do like she feels like a real person, It's like she has like these ticks and these like like little random things that she does, you know what I mean? Like she kind of has like kind of this kind of, sort of strange sense of humor. And, they don't necessarily make her out at the beginning of the movie either to be like an incredibly, I guess, using the word likable in this movie is like I think completely superfluous. Like it doesn't really like these John Cassavetes movies. They're not about you liking or
No.
agreeing with them. Like, and if you're looking for that kind of like experience, like maybe movies aren't for you. Anyway, like it's just like I find that just annoying. But like yeah, like even at the beginning of the movie, Cassavetes is also able to sort of paint her as a very complicated character. She's obviously like, going through a lot, but, she also is not a perfect person either. And she makes mistakes, right? Like she sleeps with that one random guy while her
Yeah.
husband's like at work, right? Like, that is kind of like and he never finds out either. Like the whole movie, like it never comes up
Nope.
ever again after that. So it's like, all these characters kind of have like these ambiguous qualities to it. Like when Peter Falk, like he kind of he and maybe because he doesn't know better, but like there are times where he like slaps Mabel or whatever.
Yeah.
Which I think I think I can understand people having like a problem with that, but I think it's just I think like it's not like he likes it. He loves hitting women, right? He just doesn't know any better, right? Like he himself is also like a very damaged guy. Yeah,
There is this sense throughout the film that we're not watching characters in a movie, but we're existing in this world with these
yeah.
people. And you have to
It's
give
like
it
these
all
private
to,
moments.
if you feel like a fly on the wall, you don't feel like you're watching a movie. You feel as if you were
Yeah,
spying on this family that actually exists in the world, which is an insane thing to
it's a
do
huge.
as an actor because you're not giving a performance. You're living as these characters, living as these people. And as a viewer, as you pointed out, it's not an enjoyable film in the sense that you don't feel good necessarily watching the film. You feel torn and it hurts. And at times I felt as if I was invading the privacy of these people, as if I shouldn't be a part of this, as if I was spying on these people. And I think of that moment when he has to work the night shift as a foreman for a construction company or whatever it is
He's like,
exactly
he
that he
works at like the
does.
water company or something like that, or something like that.
Something of that nature. And she waits for him because they're supposed to have this date, this dinner, this what have you.
Right.
And then she goes out and she sleeps with this guy,
Yeah.
and then nothing ever comes of it. There's no
Right. There's no like really
punishment
any.
for her infidelity. There's
Well, she is. Well, she goes to the facility.
well,
You know, she goes to I mean, that I think is I think that's punishment enough, wouldn't you say?
I would say perhaps a
But
karmic
thinking, but I know what you
punishment.
mean. Thinking about that's thinking about like, yeah, like most movies would be like, oh, this is gonna come back, you know, like this is gonna, because
Mhm.
that's how the way movies work, right? Like, but I mean, that's not really how real life works. Like real life is just like things like happen like at random times, you know, like things happen haphazardly.
Which is why this movie shouldn't work on that end because movies are supposed to have this thing that they want and they're going after it, and then either they get that thing or they don't get that thing, and then they're punished. I mean, karma is the core of all movies. Everything happens for this very specific reason. And even though there's not a single second of this movie that you could arguably cut out, there's not a single second that you could live without, everything just feels as if it happens and it doesn't feel as if this thing affects the next thing. And yet it has to. It does because that's how stories work, but they feel almost as if they're these singular moments in time. I
Mhm.
mean, the whole first half of the film takes place over the course of just a couple of days in a very short
Right.
amount of time. And you're just with these people for these long moments. I mean, these scenes go on and on and on. I think about the scene where
Have
we
dinner.
meet the doctor or
Oh,
the
okay.
dinner scene. The dinner
The
scene's a
dinner
great
scene is
point
one of the best
too.
scenes of all
It
time.
it goes the way he shoots that
Very
dinner
long.
scene too. A whole
He
instead
kills
of
it.
shooting from wides, he shoots almost exclusively from singles, but there's 15 people here. And so
Right.
there's this sense of disorientation where you're cutting from person to
Mhm.
person and she introduces herself to
Yeah.
every single person.
Yeah. She's like, "What's your name?" Yeah. It's like a very awkward scene. Yeah, like I don't know. It's just like an awkward scene. Yeah, the way that it's yeah, I love that scene. It's fun. I think the movie's funny. So okay, so here's my opinion of the movie. Here's my thing about the movie. So actually, I'm gonna take a moment. I'm gonna read this letterbox review. This is the second top one. If you go to the reviews of A Woman Under the Influence on Letterboxd,
Yeah.
this is the second to top review. So it's like the second one that you'll encounter if you're like on here. And it's from a very particularly famous Letterboxd user. And he's also a YouTuber guy as well. And people like to make fun of him, and I'm not gonna name him by name, but he is I don't really like his taste very much. Uh but I don't know, he says, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he says, similar to Faces, which is a great movie, this shit is so hard to get through. Took 4 breaks just to do something else for a few minutes. I really, really hate saying things like this, but I appreciate films like this more than I enjoy watching them. He says that has a ton of talent, some of the best acting I've ever seen. Works like this are meant to be thought about with time until I'm ready to dive back into something that raw. I really did love this movie, but I can't emphasize how happy I was when it was over. And he gave it like 4 stars and a heart. So, you know, an ostensibly positive rating and I guess a kind of positive review. I guess I don't understand what people are coming from like yeah, like the movie is emotionally difficult because it's going through these like difficult moments, but I found it very easy to sit through because it can be very funny and it's a very liberating experience when you watch it because, like we discussed, it doesn't adhere to any kind of typical like filmmaking conventions or storytelling. It is basically just all pure emotion and like that's pretty much it. And that's kind of like really what movies are all about, right? Like we can talk all day like about like filmmaking and like oh the way he did this shot and did it, like a movie like 25th Hour, which I love.
Yeah.
That has a lot of like fancy filmmaking stuff and a good story too, but a lot of fancy filmmaking stuff. Women Under the Influence and Cassavetes movies in general are just he's able to with very little in the filmmaking department. He does like sometimes like the way that he edits his movies too are very like interesting and the way he cuts the scenes too like prematurely the way that he'll like cut scenes he'll cut to a different scene like prematurely is very interesting. But ultimately, like at the end of the day, like it's just all about what you can do with a bunch of people in a room and a camera, right? And he and in Women Under the Influence, I mean, it might be the greatest example of it, just because Cassavetes was lucky. He knew a lot of he was a great actor too, but he knew a lot of great actors, right? He was married to one of the greatest actors ever. He was friends with Peter Falk, who's an amazing actor, and he their parents are um Peter Falk's mom in the movie is John Cassavetes' mom.
Oh, I did not know that.
And Gina Rollins' mom in the movie, I think that's her mom in real life.
Oh, wow.
So their moms happen to be really great actors for some reason. Um, and so yeah, they just it's just kind of Cassavetes like he clearly likes working with the people that he likes working with. Like he doesn't. I think when he casts his movies, he isn't necessarily thinking like let's try and get so and so.
No.
He's like, no, I'm going to hire my friends, like the people that I trust the most, and that comes off in the movie very well in terms of just like how people are able to like really interact and work with each other like it's real. So yeah.
And like you, I also looked through a lot of letterbox reviews, including that one, and I noticed a lot of people said something similar to that effect, where they had to stop to pause the movie, where they had to stop two or three times because of this thing or that thing.
Yeah,
And like you,
bro.
I was a little baffled by it because I have never wanted to be in an experience more, wanted to be part of a film more than this film. I think what makes a great film different from a good film is the moment a great film begins, you know it, you can see it, you can feel it, you're part of it, and you never want that moment to end. You never want to leave it.
Yeah.
You want every moment to last forever. You never want those final end credits to come. And I can't imagine experiencing this film by having any sort of pause. I think it's one of those films that you have to experience as a single moment in time because it's forcing
Yeah.
you to feel this way. And I think it is cheap. I think it is cheating to pause the film, to walk away
Yeah.
from the film because you are
Also, you got to go to the
unwilling
bathroom.
to
You should
have
at least watch it in one
the
night.
experiences. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not too much to ask for to spend a couple of hours in a space, no phones, no
Yep.
distractions, just be there with this film. I've never
Yeah.
seen a film that I think that is more important than this one. And we've watched a lot of
Yep.
challenging films for this. I think of a film like
Sure.
last year at Marion Bad, which is a film you have to have a
Yeah.
lot of focus for. You have to pay attention to the film. But this film isn't so much that it requires the amount of focus as something like last year
Yeah.
at Marion Bed takes, but it is an experience that is wholly authentic. And I don't
Yeah.
think you can get that true spectacular experience if you are scrolling on your phone or you pause because you're not feeling it or the film is hurting you. That just
I just
you
think
don't
like
get
yeah,
it.
like yeah, yeah, like in that review that I read, it just seems like he's like he said, he was just kind of like, this is a movie that I think is, more you know, better to like I think like people are over intellectualizing like the movies for this movie, right? Like they're like, oh, it's better to like, talk and think about than to actually watch, and then which is such a
It's a
stupid
ridiculous thing to
thing.
say.
It's ridiculous. It's like it's again, this movie and other Cassavetes movies are amazing and beautiful because again, his movies at the end of the day, and I think he said this. I think this is like a thing that he said. All of his movies, and this is something that like that review never ever says. His movies, I think he said, are all about love. Like they're all about the power of love, the and when you have love, you have hate, right? Like when one comes, the other, follows, right? So I mean, like if you can't wrap your head around that, then I don't know, maybe you just have not lived that full of a life, where you have bad things happen to you and people around you, or and good things too, good ththings happen. Um, they good things can happen and they do, and bad things happen and they those happen as well. Um, but yeah, I think like people are just like overthinking it as if they're trying to like the only thing that you need to get out of it is the fact that like it's a movie about love. That's pretty much it. Like don't like think too hard like about it. And I know that sounds like I don't know, anti-intellectual, but I'm not trying to be that way. Like there's plenty of to in the movie to talk about and discuss from a filmmaking point of view, from an acting point of view, obviously. Again, John Cassavetes, he's an actor, so he's kind of like an actor director, I would say. And it's clear, and I think he was known for this, right? Like I think he welcomed like um what's the word?
Feedback?
Improvisation,
Oh, okay.
so I think where he just kind of like lets the camera roll, and I think he just kind of lets like things happen when they happen, right? Like I think Gina Rowlands' big scene, right, where with the scene with the doctor, as we discussed, which is one of the greatest scenes I've ever made. Um, that might be the one of the greatest scenes ever by like a single actor involved. Although I do like when Pierre Falk like hugs her and he's like, I would lay down on a railroad track for you. That's one of the best scenes. There's another really good. Katz Fettis is also a great writer, by the way. So he
Yeah.
definitely wrote that line, and it's a great line. There's another line in the movie before this one called Minnie and Moskowitz, where Seymour Castle tells Gina Rollins like, "I love you so much, I forget to go to the bathroom," which is another great kind of lyric similar to, line similar to that. Um, but yeah, I just think like the movie is simple. I just think people for some reason get like turned off by like how powerful and potent it is, which is a great thing.
I think there is this need, especially with the creation of things like Letterboxd and the proliferation of the film community that has turned from being people who love movies and talking about movies to people who want to look like they like movies and talk about movies. And I see this with people that I know, and I'm not going to name names here,
Wow.
but I do know an individual who, unlike me and you,
It's
do
me.
this
Oh, never mind.
podcast. It's not you, Andrew, I promise. Who do this podcast out of a love for movies and just love talking about movies. And we're not so concerned with this is what this means or this is what this thing is. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here to get people to watch the movies because that's the magic of what we
Yeah.
do of cinema is to go see it. We're just here to talk about the things that we love about it. But I have a friend who is so obsessed with the intellectualization of a film, of discussing the film, of what is this thinking? What is this metaphor here? What is this simile? Think about this shot that
Yeah.
he gets caught
You missed the
up
point.
of the movie entirely. He misses the entire point of the movie. And as you said, John Cassavetes says his films are about love. And I have never seen a more accurate and haunting portrayal of love than the relationship that these two characters have. The back and forth where he wants to be there for her and love her as best he can, but at the same time, he's frustrated by her and he's angered by
Mhm.
her and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to make her feel better. There's that moment where he takes his kids to the beach because he's like, their mother just went to the nut house. They need this. They need to go to the beach. He needs to
Yeah,
be with them.
that scene is also crazy. That's a hair. So that scene, there's something about that scene that like reminded me of like I can't even like think of an example, but I just feel like scenes like that I feel like are ripped off a lot. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
dad, like the pathetic, maybe post divorce or like maybe like post losing his wife, like hanging out with the kids, and he's kind of like a pathetic, kind of like blue collar type dad, and he lets them like do things they really shouldn't do, like drink beer, right? Like I just feel like that scene. I feel like I've seen that scene so many times in like many other movies like that have
Yeah.
been made. Like I just feel like that kind of thing is like ripped off so much.
And it's never done as powerfully as it is
Yeah,
in this movie.
yeah,
Because again, what makes this movie so spectacular is even though there are these obnoxiously high stakes for everyone involved, I mean, they send their mom, wife, daughter, friend to an asylum. Despite all of that, this film is so close and it never feels as if we are dramatizing this moment. And it
yeah,
would be so easy to dramatize that moment with him and his kids and have this big moment and have this giant crying fit or this yelling. And instead, it's just him walking on a beach, sitting in a car with his kids, and it's perfect. It is the
yeah,
exact thing that you didn't know that you needed because you think, oh, this is a big moment. We need to see him do something big and obnoxious. And there are these giant moments which are incredible, like from Gina Rollins uh, or him, where they're
Peter
giving these
Falk.
really Peter Falk, thank you, where they're giving these really big performances, and yet perhaps the moments where they are most spectacular is in those smaller moments. I mean, with Gina Rollins, every time she introduced herself to someone, those moments to me are so weird and amazing and magical. The hi, my name's blah blah blah. What's your name? What's your name? And her just going around the room and
Yeah,
introducing herself to people. And the whole cast of characters, because even though it's really just focused on these two, there's a lot of people that kind of come in and out and have
yeah, their
singular
parents.
moments. They all seem to recognize that she is this way, that she's always been this way, and they sort of just go along with her. And you feel the awkwardness, you feel the
Yeah,
uncomfortableness that they feel, which is a very hard thing to capture. I think it's very easy to capture being angry, being upset, being sad, being depressed, but I think it is much harder to capture the awkwardness that can come
yeah,
from
yeah. And there's no
someone that
music
you
too
barely
in these
know.
scenes.
No.
There's very little music in the movie. There's no like there's barely like yeah, like any like kind of like yeah.
It
That adds to the awkwardness.
refuses to manipulate you. It refuses to tell you this is what this movie is
You're gonna
about.
like sit
This
down.
is
You're
what,
gonna sit through it.
and you're gonna sit through the whole scene. I mean,
But I love it because so like some people again might be like, oh, it's so awkward. Oh, I can't sit through it. But to me, like I love like that tension. It has like the tension of like a horror movie, really. Like the dinner
mhm.
scene in particular, right? It has like the tension of a horror scene because you're just like, what the fuck is gonna happen? Like, and even if nothing happens, that I think that's still like an effective that you still like experience the awkwardness of that scene as it progressed and the tension like mounted and things got weird, like that is still like a very effective like scene. Yeah.
And the idea of comparing this to a horror film is a really
Maybe
intriguing
that
way
scene.
to look at that film, at least that scene in particular, because there is this sense throughout the film, from the beginning to the end, even after she comes back from the mental hospital, that something is just off. Something isn't right. And you are waiting for that moment to hit. You are waiting for those moments in which everything just explodes, everything goes wrong. And even
Yeah.
when you have those climactic moments where you feel like you can have that moment of relief after she decides, or they decide for her, that she's going to go to the hospital,
Yeah.
and you get the 6 months later thing after he goes out with his kids and stuff, there's still that incredible sense of tension. It just won't let go. And them
Yeah.
preparing for her to come back and having all of those people.
Like that to me, like that whole part of the movie is just like, what is going on, man? Like when they have all those people there that they ask them to leave, like there's something so like I don't know why that felt like so real to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that felt so like to me, a scene like that just seems like something people like a screenwriter wouldn't normally write. You know, I feel like something like that had to have happened, right? Where someone is like coming back from the hospital and they schedule this whole party, and then the family is like, you know what? No, we can't have these people here. They have to, like to me, there's just something so specific about like a moment like that I don't know. It just feels so it feels so authentic.
And I think part of what makes it so authentic is on a certain level, it really shouldn't work because we spend 5, 10, 15 minutes preparing for the party with all of these people. We have all these great scenes. And so you need that payoff. The classic storytelling arc is we have created these expectations. So now we need the payoff of her coming home and all these people being here. And he subverts that to the idea that once she gets back, everything's going to be okay and she's going to be
Yeah.
better. And suddenly she's fixed. And
Yeah.
instead we get this thing which is paralleled between the party first, where there's this almost climactic letdown where everyone's just asked to leave, and as they're leaving she comes up to the house and she's realizing that these people are leaving. And I think of that moment where it's just the family sitting
Yeah.
around the table and the kids are there, and one of the kids asks her mother
Yeah.
how her day was, or how things are, or where have you been, or
Yeah.
what have you been doing. And she basically goes through the horrific
Right. They fry
medical
your brain.
treatments
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
were the mental hospital of the 1970s, of electroshock therapy and just the
Yeah.
different chemicals that they give you, and just being forced into this state where you're quote unquote normal. Be yourself, right?
What?
Peter
Yeah.
Falk, be yourself,
Be
be yourself.
yourself.
But there
Just
is
be
no.
yourself. Don't. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like that's so okay. So again, kind of going back a little bit, I love the scene when she sees her kids for the first time after getting back to the hospital. That has to be one of the greatest scenes ever filmed. Just because like the way that Cassavetes like films it, like where she kind of like her hair is kind of like shadowing her, and she goes through those like curtains, right? Like she goes through
Yeah.
those curtains, like, and it's like all kind of like close up, like it's so intimate. It's such like an intimate like moment between like a mother and her children. That's really what it feels like. It really feels like an intimate, secret, private moment between her children, between the mother and her children. And the way he like films that, like so up close, and she's crying and she's hugging the kids. Nothing's ever been better than that. Like it's unbelievable how good that scene is. And yeah, like what you were talking about, um, that's sort of like the paradox of the situation, right? Where Peter Falk, he is convinced by his mother to send his wife to a facility. And he loves his wife. He really does. Like there's no doubt about it.
No.
But he doesn't like know how to handle her, I guess, handle her. Like he
Mhm.
can't his mom again, his mom is convincing her that like she needs help and like things will be better from here. But when she gets back, she's been neutered, right?
Yeah.
Like she has been fried, and Pure Falk is like upset about it. And she's like, yeah, he does that speech where he's like, just be yourself, just be yourself. But like he's realizing that like he loves his wife the way that she is, right? And he was essentially convinced by his mom to send her to facility when she really didn't need to.
Mhm.
Um, and he's also embarrassed by like that crazy scene where like that guy drops off his kids at the house, and there's that weird, like crazy scene where like they're trying on like outfits and stuff. And so he's like, like when Peter Falk, it's sad, but I was also laughing at the fact that like Peter Falk is also like a crazy guy too, because he goes in that house and he just starts like yelling and punching people. Like he's just like a very like violent, like loud guy. And so he's like embarrassed by that moment, even though no one got hurt. Like everyone's fine. I guess like that guy, I guess Peter Falk got punched, but whatever. They're just, old men. Who
Whatever.
cares? Yeah. And and so yeah, it's just kind of like this paradoxical situation where like she's back and like so she must be like quote unquote better, but she's not acting the way she used to, and that's what he actually likes about her. He likes the way that she acts, even if it's like occasionally difficult. So it's that whole part of the movie is very sad.
Yeah, and maybe this is just coming from a sentimental place of soon being a father myself, but I have never seen a more loving, caring, and authentic portrayal of what it means to be a mother or a father, even though this is
Yeah.
not. I, I'm prefacing this because my mom listens to this podcast, and so I know she's going to hear this. My mom's not psychotic. She doesn't have to go to a mental hospital. I love her to death. But there are things that she does that remind me of my own mother. And I don't mean that in a malicious
Yeah.
sense,
Well, again,
but
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It
it's
can be like it can be like again, I think like that's why like the movie is so good. I hope that when people watch it, and why it's kind of frustrating when people are saying like, oh, it's difficult. It's like you really like can't like see some aspect of you or someone in it, like at
Mhm.
all. It's like that's like kind of like why the movie's so good.
And I think that's the reason so many people have this sense of almost disgust when they watch the movie is because they do recognize themselves in this film. They do
Yeah.
recognize their family members and their friends, and they
But they
don't
don't
want
want to see
to.
it.
They
They
don't
don't
want
want
to
to.
see
They
that.
they want to watch Star Wars where they don't see. They want to watch like a Star Wars movie where it's just like like, and it's like man, like that's sad. That's much more sad, I think.
Everyone wants the heroes and villains, but no one wants to see the
Yeah,
complexity that are
it's
human
true.
beings. The fact that we
Yeah.
may slap our wife, but I don't slap my wife, I promise.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I don't condone it. I don't like, and
we don't
again, but
condone it.
but I don't even think Cassavetes condones it either. He's not saying
No,
that like
absolutely not.
I think he's saying that like, he's just saying that like Peter Falk's character is like kind of like he's also a troubled man who doesn't really know how to like take care of like his wife in a way that's uh you know and like he again, he's just like a troubled man. I don't think he's like condoning. And again, people will watch it and be like, oh, like I'm supposed to like identify with this guy who like hits his wife. I don't even think you're necessarily supposed to identify with him. I think you can at least like recognize that like he is troubled, she is troubled. The combination of them kind of creates this effect, right? And it kind of like reverberates into the kids. That scene where he keeps like taking the kids upstairs and they keep running back down. That's another thing, that's like another scene kind of similar to like the when he has to ask like the people to leave, where
Yeah.
like you can't write that shit. I guess you like, to me, like that to me is just so like simple. It's so simple, and the fact that it happens, I think, like more than once, it happens like two or three times, like
Hmm.
that wouldn't be like, most screenwriters would not do that. They would do it maybe like one time and it would be a very dramatic moment, but that scene is so real and it's so sad, or at least those moments. Maybe not scene, but those moments where they
Yeah,
run down.
it's one of the most powerful moments in this movie, and the way he uses children in this film,
I think he actually gives them beer, right? Those kids really do drink that
it
beer
looks like
because
they're drinking beer.
he opens it
He
and it's
opens a
like,
beer
okay, that's a
can,
beer, and he gives it to them,
and
and
there's
it's a
no
long
cut.
shot of them just, yeah, yeah.
He definitely gave
That's
those kids
amazing.
beer, which I love.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be giving our children beer, but
It was the 1970s. It's different, it's
different
like
times.
that's why the 1970s rock, dude. Like it's just the best decade for like movies because no one gave a fuck. Like it's the best filmmakers making the best movies. They the graininess of this film like
Oh my
is
God.
beautiful. Like
Beautiful.
it will never be achieved ever again in the history of time, you know. So, you know, the 70s, like, you know,
There is nothing like it in any space or time. And the film that I thought of that reminded me in a certain way of this film was Sean Baker's The Florida Project, in that the children are portrayed in this way where they are not actors who are there to
yeah,
merely move a scene forward. I think as someone
they run
who
around and play.
they're kids, they do things kids do. They have this sense of just being told,
Yeah.
hey, what would you do in this situation? And watching them do it, not telling them, oh, you need to do this
Mhm.
thing or that thing. I think that's one of the great misfortunes of modern cinema is we depict children as this thing that they never were, and we refuse to see the magic of being a kid and those moments of not understanding or thinking we understand, or that moment where they're going back down to see their mom because they think this is the thing that they need to do. They think that they're helping her, and the frustration with the father because he's sort of fighting himself in that moment because part of him agrees with the kids, part of him wants to be there for her, and then the other part of him is hating himself and is in this frustrated and angered place, and he can't seem to find a middle ground. He just doesn't know what
Yeah.
to do. He's lost. I mean, we think about that moment where he hits his wife, but it's not coming from a place of anger necessarily. It's
Yeah.
not because he's
He loves
drunk
it. Yeah. Yeah.
and he's drunk on power and he loves beating her. It's nothing like that. It's his
Yeah.
own frustration. He doesn't know what else to do. He doesn't know how to solve the situation. And
Yeah.
his only option in his mind is violence because he doesn't know how to help her. He wants to help her and he
Mhm.
doesn't know what to do. So he moves to violence because he doesn't know how to express how he feels, just like she struggles
Yeah.
to be understood by everyone else.
Yeah. That's pretty much, yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Yeah. Like he can't, yeah, he just can't express himself, you know. And I think too, like in front of the like his buddies, you know, his work buddies, you know, at the dinner table, you know, he again, it's like he feels like embarrassed, right, of his wife, even though he loves her and everything about her, right? And he needs to, he's self conscious, right? And he's self conscious about not only what his friends think and what other random people think, but also what his mom thinks, which is why, you know, he sends her to the facility, really. And so, yeah, he's like this extremely like self conscious guy, while, you know, his wife is like a little bit less self conscious. You know, she's more kind of, I guess, like he says, unusual, right? Like she kind of like says and does things that are a little bit, what's the word? Like, um, you know, she has kind of like a sense of humor. Like I love the scene too of Gina Rollins like yelling at people as they're walking by in the street because she asked them to for the
For the
time and stuff.
time.
Like that scene is so fucking funny. Yeah, she kills me, and like they're like they have like the party and stuff, and she's like singing and dancing. There's a lot of John Cassavetes movies have a lot of singing in them, like people singing
Yeah.
like like drunkenly too. And
Hmm.
alcoholism is also John Cassavetes died of alcoholism. Basically, he died of cirrhosis. So
Yeah.
like alcoholism is like a thing in all of his movies for sure. Of people drinking like opening night, right? Like
Hmm.
the final the opening night, right? The titular opening night. They're about to do the show, and the Gina Rollins character. I think you saw that movie, right?
Yeah, I've seen opening night. Yeah.
Yeah, she like arrives and she's sloshed. Like she like gets there and she's like she can barely stand and she's like the main character of the play and she can barely like stand up. Like that's just crazy. And it's sad and also funny and you know, it's like a very ambiguous kind of like thing that's happening. Um but yeah, again, like we talked about like in a woman under the influence, like that those two characters like they compete with each other, you know, they work with each other but they also don't. Um you know, and and again it just feels real, you know, and it's and that's kind of like a very like oh you know what's real what isn't, but it's kind of like the best way to describe it.
Yeah. And there's this yin and yang between
Right.
Peter Falk and Gina Rowlands in the sense that she doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks
She has
of
no
how she
shame. Yeah.
behaves. She has no shame, which is the thing that makes her unusual, is she
Yeah.
is 100% authentic all of the time, which is an uncomfortable place for everyone else to exist in because we've learned that we need to act a certain way when we're around these certain people, and we need to put on these masks and these cloaks and these ways of acting when we're in polite society, we're doing this. And Peter Falk on the opposite end, I think of that moment right after she has gone to the quote unquote nut house, and he goes to the construction site, and his friends are there and offer to help him. He says, "Hey, I heard you had a hard night. I heard your wife is not doing well. How can I help?" And he's
Yeah.
furious with them
Yeah. He's
because
so mad. He doesn't want them to talk.
he doesn't want them to talk about because he feels embarrassed. He feels ashamed. In his mind, he's already done something wrong. And as we see towards the end, perhaps he did make the wrong decision. I mean, it probably made the wrong decision
Yeah.
in that moment. Sending her does not seem like it was the best intentions, but he is so afraid of being embarrassed. I mean, that moment where he has to send the party away, his mom has to do it at first because he can't do it. He's like, I can't do
He
that. I
can't.
invited all these
He's
people
like
here.
shameful. He's
He's
so shameful. He can't do it.
it's just truly incredible.
Yeah, it's a pretty I love Peter Falk, by the way. Like I've talked about Columbo and stuff like that. He's one of the
Yeah.
greatest. Like I love him. Anytime I see him in a movie, he's got a great voice and a great like. I love like his downtroddenness.
Hmm.
You know, like he has such like a great downtrodden kind of like ah shucks kind of attitude. He's really funny, and he's kind of like I think he has like a lazy eye or something like that too.
Yeah.
Um, he's so good. He's such a great actor. I just like I always have a good time like seeing him and stuff. Um, and that character is great. Like he brings a lot of depth to that character, and I would recommend like watching this little like video that Criterion did that's on the channel where it's Peter Falk and Gina Rowlands talking a little bit about like the movie like years later, like decades later.
Yeah.
And like Peter Falk does his talk about how he had never seen greater acting than like the scene that Gina Rowlands does when she's like about to go to the
Yeah.
where the doctor is there to take her to the facility. He's just like I never seen acting better than like he's very he's very positive about that. And yeah, I think I tend to agree.
It's hard to disagree. And that does put us just about at an hour. Should we give
Yeah,
our final
sure.
thoughts on this piece?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. I'll go first on this one. As I pointed out at the very beginning of this podcast, and I was saying it was one of the best films we've seen for the podcast, but I'm going to stand by here. And we've watched a lot of great films for this podcast. I think this is the best film we've ever seen for this
Whoa,
podcast.
that's up
Uh,
there.
I mean, we've done over 200 podcast episodes. We've talked about hundreds and hundreds of movies between our show and our after show. But I legitimately think this is one of the best movies that we've seen for the podcast. And I think it's one of the best movies I have ever seen in my life. It is
Yep.
easily a 10 out of 10 for
Yeah.
all of the reasons that we have pointed out, not just the acting or the filmmaking prowess, but really for the authenticity of this film. I think that's what makes this film so much better than almost any film I have ever seen. And as I've never seen such an authentic and honest portrayal of psychosis and love and what it means to be a
Mhm.
father and a mother and a parent and just the multi-generational of being a parent yourself but also having parents
Mhm.
and the complications that come with that and trying to love someone when the rest of the world thinks that you shouldn't or it just there's something wrong or trying to be yourself trying to be be yourself who what does that mean what does it mean to be yourself how
Right.
do we act as ourselves but still give all the things that we need to give for everyone else to still be that person that they want us to be because everyone thinks that who we are is a different person. People tell you to be yourself, but they expect you to be their version of yourself. You can
Yeah.
never be your version of yourself, because if you're your version of yourself, then there's something unusual about you. There's something crazy. There's something psychotic about you, and we can't exist in this world. No one wants us to exist in this world. And I just felt so overwhelmed in the best of ways
Yep.
by this film that I
Hmm.
never wanted to leave. As I pointed out at the beginning, when you watch a great movie, the difference between a great movie and a good movie, and I think this is the difference between a 9 and a 10 for me, is when you're watching a movie that's a 9 out of 10, you have a good time, you love it, you talk about all of the technical aspects of it, and you say, oh my gosh, something like last year, Marion Bad, look at how they did this, look how
Hmm.
they got this shot. But what makes a 10 out of 10 movie, it's not technical. Like
Hmm.
you could have the technically best movie ever, that doesn't make it a 10 out of 10 movie. What makes it a 10 out of 10 movie is it moves you in a way that nothing else in the world can. And when you finish that movie, you are a fundamentally different person than you were when you started it. And I can say that I will never exist in the world the same way as I did before I've seen this movie. It's easily one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds about right. I mean, again, I think it's the best Cassavetes movie I've seen. I had the pleasure again of watching a total of like seven of them this past like couple weeks, and I think he will go down as one of my favorite directors. I mean, his movies really, and I was able to watch all seven of them because I find them to be exciting. I think they're fun. I think they're interesting. Like I don't think they're chores to watch. And Women Under Influence like isn't a chore like some people think it is. Like it really is like a very powerful, moving, beautiful and experience. And I don't think like it's a difficult um as long as you're like open minded about it. Yeah, I guess like the length is long, but I wouldn't change anything about it. Like it just
No.
the movie is the length. The movie is just the length that it ought to be. So it's just the like, whether it would be 2 or 2.5 hours, like that's just, whatever. Who cares? Like what's 30 minutes more? Anyway, yeah, I mean, like again, I think it's the best cast of Castellanos movies of the ones that I've seen. Although I've heard Love Stream, Love Streams is very good. That's basically his final film, and I've heard that one is very good. And Opening Night was really good too. I love that one. But yeah, Women Under Their Influence, it's just too powerful. Like it's too that domestic kind of environment is just I think perfected. And yeah, I would give it a 10 out of 10 as well, of course.
Wow. Well, thank you all for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much.